Good morning. Today we finish the book of Exodus with chapters 39 and 40. And just because we finish the book of Exodus doesn't mean that the Israelites are at the promised land by any stretch of the imagination. The books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy will continue that journey. Leviticus especially is a lot more laws. But the Israelites don't really get to the promised land until the beginning of the book of Joshua. I mean, Moses doesn't get to go there. We all know that. But anyway, chapter 39 of Exodus, the temple, everything is complete. Everything is made, except the robe for Aaron, for the high priest, and the albs, for the other priests. And so they're making these sacred vestments for Aaron. And, it says they used gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarn. Well, gold isn't something that you really think of as yarn. I mean, we might have gold-colored thread and material, but it says that they hammered out gold and made a thread, Gold leaf was hammered out and cut into threads to work into the blue and purple. And I think about that, the skill for the hammering out of this gold to get it, thin and uniform, and then to cut it into the strips, and the pounding on it, the beating of it, the malleability of gold. It's a soft metal and can be done that way. But it just kind of brought to mind, when I was watching Hank Severson, the blacksmith in McHenry when I was growing up. He'd be working on a horseshoe, or he'd be working on making something over in his blacksmith shop there, and things would be in the forge and come out of there red hot, and it's like you watch people with glass blowing and stuff, and the skill that is needed for that. And I've watched videos of people taking just a piece of steel and pounding it, hammering it into a knife blade, and then heating it and treating it so that it's hard. The skill to be able to do what they did, to hammer that gold into thin enough layer and uniformly thin layer to then cut it into the strips, the threads of gold, and the skill then to weave that gold thread into this other with all of the colors and put it all into the fine twisted linen, so they had the fine linen cloth, and it makes me think about, when my wife does hardanger or something like that, she gets this material and then uses the different colored threads to go into it, and the beauty that comes from those different things, and there's counted cross stitch and so many different things that way that, as I read this, it brings into my mind, and the skill of all of that. And I guess it's the skill of anything. Here I am in my wood shop, and I made some cutting boards that look like a piano keyboard, and I'm working on some other ones right now that will look like a shelf unit, but they're not, but it isn't just my skill, because it's, a pattern that I've got in a magazine, and then I can read the instructions to be able to do that. But these Israelites, they had the instructions from God, God gave to Moses, and then Moses gave to them, and the God-given skill and the talents that come that way. And, there are so many people in our world that have some of these God-given skills, and the world just doesn't value that, or they get put down, and some of those God-given skills and talents that people have, get looked over, or we're told that they're, that's not what you should be doing, and so we sometimes forget about some of those God-given skills, and they're not all, and sometimes it's, working and practicing, and, I make plenty of mistakes with things here in my wood shop as well. And just like, anybody that's doing anything, we don't do things perfectly, but but we do as best we can. So anyway, they make the vestments for Aaron, for the high priest and for the other priests, and it just, chapter 39 pretty much is talking about that until we get to verse 32, or 31 says they tied to it a blue cord to fasten on the turban as the Lord had commanded Moses. So, they did it, and the thing of it is, they remembered all that. Moses remembered all of that too, And then verse 32, in this way, the work of the tabernacle of the tent of the meeting was finished. The Israelites had done everything as the Lord had commanded Moses. And then they brought the tabernacle to Moses, the tent with all its utensils, its hooks, its frames, and all of that. And they put it all together, verse 43, the last of chapter 39, when Moses saw they had done all the work as the Lord commanded, he blessed them. And then chapter 40 begins with God speaking to Moses again. On the first day of the first month, you will set the tabernacle up, the tabernacle of the tent of the meeting. You'll put the ark in it. You'll do all of it. You'll set it up. And so you remember, the Israelites led out of captivity. And it was about 3 months later when Moses went up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments the first time, came down. It was 40 more months up on the mountain getting the second tablets. And then they moved from there to here where they are now and did all of this work. And so it's, they've been, free people for, a little over a year or so. It was about nine months if you kind of look at everything in here, and from the time that they got to where they are camped now until they set up the tabernacle. And so Moses did, in verse 16, Moses did everything as the Lord commanded him. In the first month of the second year, on that first day of the month, the tabernacle was set up. So a year from the time they had left, here they are. They've got everything set up and going. He raised its poles, raised its pillars, spread the tent over the tabernacle. So, these long curtains, that were fastened in the middle on the top and came over, everything was set up and done. And the Holy of Holies was put in there. The Ark of the Covenant was in there. And, the Ark of the Covenant, it was a container. And in that Ark of the Covenant, there was, the 10 Commandments. And when the manna first started coming, they were told to take some of that manna, and put it into a jar and, forever. So that was another one of the things that would have been put into that Ark of the Covenant, I'm sure. So he puts that in there and gets everything set up and going as the Lord had commanded. We'll see that several times in this chapter 40. He set up the lamps before as the Lord commanded. He put the golden altar in the temple. He offered the fragrant incense, and he put and so doing some of this, I'm sure, is Aaron, as the high priest is doing some of this, and others as well that are getting everything set up. And, the basin is set there with which Moses and Aaron and his sons washed their hands and their feet when they went into the temple. And so all of the preparations. And in verse 33, the court was set up, the screen on the court, so Moses finished the work. And then the cloud covered the tent. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And, the Lord, God had said to Moses, you go with their people. And Moses had said, hey, they're your people. You stay with them. So here in this tent of the tabernacle that they had put up, God was there. That says the cloud covered the tent of the meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses was not able to enter the temple because the cloud settled upon it, and the glory of the Lord was there. And when the cloud of the Lord lifted, then the people would move. But you think about the work that went into it, and the joy of the completion of it. And then for the Israelites to see that God indeed was with them, as he was evidently there with the cloud and everything that was covering the tabernacle. You know, the presence of God. I mean, you know, just, you know, when we go to church sometimes we think we're more in the presence of God than we are, you know, but, you know, really, any place we are in the presence of God, and that's a wonderful thing to know.